Hello and welcome to the Grub Street Blogger. I am currently in my Corona lockdown chic, and it's time to talk about March. Now, March has not been the most normal of months, yada yada yada, coronavirus, yada yada yada, lockdown. We all know this. For the people of the future, there'll be enough videos telling them that this is happening. Has it improved my reading? Has all this time on my hands, I mean, I'm currently working from home right now, as you can see. Has all this time on my hands turned me into a lean, mean reading machine? Not really. To be honest, the first few weeks, I work at a school, there was a lot of confusion. I kept going to school, we didn't know if we were going to shut, it was all very up in the air. I read a lot less than usual. And then since then, I don't know, this weird untethered feeling, it's made it hard to get a good reading routine. But I have read some, and mostly what I've been reading is poetry. And so that's what we're going to talk about. So the first book I completed this month was William Cooper's Selected Poems. Luckily we managed to get one Dr. Johnson reading circle in before the whole world shut down, which was good. And it was about this, and I was a bit unsure because I have a bit of an awkward relationship with poems. I've always felt they're a bit like Procruste's bed. You ever heard that story? This guy says he's got a magic bed and it fits anyone of any size perfectly. And the way it fits is if you're too long, he chops your ankles off. And if you're too short, he stretches you to be long enough. And I've often felt like a poem is a kind of Procruste's bed for ideas. It just stretches them or squashes them or cuts a bit off. It's actually a really bad way of addressing an idea. But I'm warming to poetry a bit more now. I'm beginning to find poets I enjoy, and I quite liked William Cooper. I have to say, I was not expecting to, because when I read the little biography at the beginning, it said he was a depressive. I was like, oh dear, these are going to be depressing. And he was very mannered, and I thought, oh dear, these are going to be stiff and depressing. But they're not. They're very personal. They're often very pardon me, they're often very joyful, and that's what I really like. And even when they're not joyful, they're real, I think. Yes, and so I very much enjoyed the epitaph on a hare, which is about his pet hare who died, but it's all about how this hare had a lovely life and how it was free from cruelty and pain. There's one where a bird is killed by a spaniel, but then there's the response from the spaniel saying, "Sorry, I couldn't help it." And yeah, these are mostly very, very good. There was this one called The Yardley Oak, and it's all about an oak, and the whole point of the poem is quite good in that it's all about how something as large as an oak has weathered time and how it's seen all these things that we can't and how it's bigger than us, and that's great. However, it's written in this sort of oldie fashioned style to give it some weight and some oomph, which makes sense, but just comes up with some really daft lines. Where's the one I particularly liked? Oh yeah. So the oak is a baby. We're referring to when it's little and it's a sapling. A leaf succeeded, and another leaf, and all the elements thy puny growth, fostering propitious, thou becamest a twig. Bit naff in it. But he doesn't often fall into naff, and that's very good. This one called The Castaway is wonderful. It's about a man being washed off of a boat and his mates seeing him drowning as the boat goes on and they can't do anything to help. And then he compares it to himself. No voice divine the storm allayed, no light propitious shone. When snatched from all effectual aid, we perished each alone. But I beneath a rougher sea, and whelmed in deeper gulfs than he. And I think that sums up when you're in a bad mood. Sums up when you're depressed. And he was. I mean, he had probably had depression. You can't really say about historical people, but he was certainly very low at many times of his life. At the same time, though, it captures that kind of self obsession that comes with depression. He's heard this story about a man drowned alive and says, "Well, I've got it worse than him," as he's sitting there in his nice house drinking tea. Going to read much more? No, I'm going to read one more. This is actually a translation he made of a Latin poem, but I really like it. It's called The Snail. The Snail. To grass or leaf or fruit or wall, the snail sticks close, nor fears to fall, as if he grew there, house and all, together. Within that house secure he hides, when danger imminent besides, of storm or other harm betides, of weather. Give but his horns the slightest touch, his self-collecting power is such, he shrinks into his house with much displeasure. Where'er he dwells alone, except himself has chattels none, well satisfied to be his own whole treasure. Thus, hermit-like, his life he leads, nor partner of his banquet needs, and if he meets one, only feeds the faster. Who seeks him must be worse than blind, he and his house are so combined, if finding it he fails to find its master. So yes, William Cooper, very charming, and we had a very charming evening sharing bits of these together. Right, next book happens to be another poem. It's Gilgamesh. Now, I've read a version of Gilgamesh, but I got interested in this one because it claims to retell the older tradition of Gilgamesh, which is a more feminine tradition, and it has Inanna in it, who becomes the goddess Ishtar. And Inanna is the name of the main character of the book I'm writing. And I wanted to see how much my Inanna and the mythical Inanna fit together. So I thought, a Gilgamesh with an Inanna in it. Let's go for it. Well, she is in it. She's not in it much. I got something else completely. I loved this book. This Gilgamesh Retold, Jenny Lewis. It's really, really good. It's it's a person retelling the story. She's using an English translation to do it, and she adopts different prose meters for different parts of the story. So sometimes she goes a bit Anglo-Saxon, and sometimes she tries other versions. If you heard a bleep, as I said, I'm working from home. So, yeah, it's brilliant. The way she uses repetition is fantastic. And then you have things like the battle against Humbaba, the ogre in the cedar forest. And it's really vicious and violent, and the way he gets his head ripped off, and then there's a pause, and you kind of realise Gilgamesh and Enkidu, they've done something bad. Yes, they've won the cedar wood to make the walls of the town. They've improved their civilization, but they've done it at the expense of the natural order. And there's a certain link to that with us, I think, and climate change and things like that. And the way that particular poem uses blank space. Where is it? I'm not going to find it now, am I? Yeah, well, it does. It uses this blank space to I wish they'd stop messaging, to do the pauses. It's wonderful. The same when they kill the bull, the bull from the sky that Inanna sends down. Now, that's all great. Then Enkidu is told he's going to die. It's not like they're even sending any messages of any importance anyway. But hey, so then Enkidu is told he's going to die, and he just sort of does. He fades away, and as he does so, his memories go back over his life, and you get this sort of polyphonic, polyphonic thing, two different voices as he fades away, and then that's pretty cool. I mean, that's really nice. Not nice. It's moving. It's very moving. So then Gilgamesh goes on his journey to get eternal life, and he fails. And in failing, he becomes a better king. And I really like that as a meaning. I read all this in about 45 minutes, I think. It's not a dense book in any way, and it was moving, and it was just thrilling at times. It was very exciting, the exciting bits. It was very sad. And then it comes to that ending where Gilgamesh has the wisdom of of mortality, and I just thought that was brilliant. So there you go. So I carried on the theme. I bought a book called Inanna, Goddess of Heaven and Earth, and this is yet another book in which cuneiform tablets have been put into English, and then they've been turned into poetry. And you get these different chunks. So the first one is all about Inanna, essentially she's a goddess, but has no real power, and she finds a tree that she wants to put in her holy garden. All sexual puns in this are meant, by the way, even ones you couldn't really picture, like her boat is apparently her vulva, water is semen, everything sexual. Anyway, so she has a tree, she plants it in the garden, and the trouble is the tree gets all these guardians around it and she can't do anything about it. So Gilgamesh comes along with his big chopper, as I said about the puns, gets rid of the guardians, and now she makes a throne and a bed. And those are the two things she needs for her power. She needs a place to rule from and a place to sleep with people, or one particular person. But we'll get to that. And then the next one is about Inanna going to Enlil, the god of wisdom. And the good thing about this is she gets him drunk on beer, and she steals a whole bunch of me. Now, a me is a physical object that represents a skill or something that you build civilization from. And she steals 72 me. She steals a whole bunch of me. Apparently, in the original version, this gets repeated 4 times, and it's thought that this story was partly used to teach children of the me. So they include things like priesthood, godship, kingship, measuring, thrones, shepherds, priestesses, priests, the underworld, black garments, colourful garments, haircuts, loose hair, love-making, the kissing of the phallus, the art of prostitution, taverns, slanderous speech, forthright speech, pretty speech, musical instruments, power, heroes, plundering of cities, lamentation when your city is plundered, the art of kindness, the art of deceit, the art of travel, woodworker, copperworker, scribe, smith, leather maker, fuller, builder, a perceptive ear, and ears for them mean wisdom, the power of attention, which I could do with more of, feeding pen, hot coals, fear, dismay, consternation, fire, putting out fire, the kindling of strife, counselling, heart-soothing, judgments, and decision-making. And they're the me, they're the things that their civilization they see is founded on. And it's a really interesting list. You could go through that list for quite a while, I think, and think, okay, so deceit is one of the very foundations of civilization. And I suppose it is, but it's not one we'd admit to. And she steals these, and she buggers off with them, and Enlil tries to get them back with monsters, but doesn't work. Cool. So we get to our next story, in which she looks at her, as she describes it, wondrous vulva, and says she needs somebody to plough this vulva. She wants some farmer, she says. But then her advisors say, no, look for the Shepherd King. The Shepherd King's the one to go, because he has rich, creamy milk. And she goes, oh yeah, he does have rich, creamy milk. And so they flirt with each other, and they compare bits of their bodies to various things. Who will plough my high ground? Who will plough my wet field? At the king's lap stood the rising cedar. Plants grew by their side. Blah, blah, blah. It's all very fertile. I will give you milk sweet and thick. And later on she calls him a honey man. And so they get together, her and Dumuzi, the king shepherd. And then Dumuzi goes off to do kingy things, and she sort of feels a bit flat. That leads to the next story. And in the next story, she goes to the underworld. She puts on all her grand garments, and to get in the underworld, she's got to strip them all off. And then she's murdered and hung up like a pig on hooks. But she's got an escape plan, and it comes into play. She comes back to life, and she gets out of hell, but she's pursued by demons. What's she going to do? Well, that husband's annoying her. So she sets the demons on him. And this is why Gilgamesh, he's saying, I don't want to be your lover because I know what happens to your lovers. You set hell demons on them. And she does because he's been ignoring her recently. And yeah, that's the end of that story. In the next story, it's Demudzi trying to trick the demons and failing. And then the next story is Inanna going, I feel a bit bad about setting hell demons on my husband. So she makes a deal where he has to go to hell for half the year. And he essentially becomes the Sumerian Persephone. And then the last section is hymns and songs saying how great Inanna is. And the fact is, Inanna is great. She has such power. She has such confidence. She uses trickery when she needs to. She gives things up when she needs to. If someone annoys her, oh god, yeah, don't annoy Inanna. She'll come for you with hell demons. But I really liked it. It was weird because some of this actually went into the Bible in some ways. Like some of the courtship song between Inanna and Demudzi go into the Song of Songs, and some of the hymns to Inanna sort of phrases crop up in the Psalms, and a lot of the rhythms do as well if they've translated the rhythms of either in any way correct. But there's this sort of repetition thing. So it would be like Inanna walked up to the door. Inanna, the Queen of Heaven, walked up to the door. Inanna, Queen of Heaven, walked up to the sacred portal. You know, and you'd use this repetition where you add different sort of set phrases, which in a whole book was okay actually. It could have got annoying if it was much more, but I liked it, and it sort of gave you that feeling of, oh yeah, these were made to be sung and chanted to each other. So and oral for the most part. They were written down in cuneiform tablets, but you know, people singing them and telling them to each other. And I really loved it, and it gave me this wonderful feel of a very different kind of religion. It's a much earthier sort of religion. It accepts the bad things as just part of life. Like civilization includes lamentation, it includes thievery and deceit, as well as good things. And Inanna, as the goddess, she's not all benevolent. She's a feisty. She's sort of fighting her corner, and for the people of Uruk, the town of which she was the guardian, she was their corner. So this is why she's great. She's this powerful person fighting our corner, and I that kind of whole way of religion and all the sex in it, and yeah, it's very interesting and very different. And I'm very I'm very glad I called the main character Inanna, because I think some of this is going to leak into the character, and it's going to give her a lot of power and a lot of oomph and make her really interesting. And that's what she's supposed to be. She's not a good character, my Inanna character. She's more than anything else just an interesting character. Something not poetry now. It's a biography. This is of Charlotte Charke, née Cibber. She was the daughter of Colley Cibber, who was the very bad poet laureate who everyone took the piss out of, who was also an actor. And she was his daughter, and she also became an actor. And she performed in Drury Lane for a bit. She specialised in sort of pert... oh, I'm wearing my glasses. Oh, cool. I prefer not wearing my glasses on camera. I see better. Well, I see worse, but I look like I see better. Should I start this again? Nah. It's a rambly coronavid. Who cares? Right, so, yes, Charlotte Charke. She was an actor. She specialised in sort of pert maid characters, maids who should know better kind of thing. And then breeches roles, either Shakespearean type ones where the women dress up as the men, or actual male roles. She had a bit of an argument with her family, and she felt she wasn't really getting the right deal out of Drury Lane, so she went and joined the Little Theatre in Haymarket, which was where Fielding was doing the writing, and she pioneered some of those really sharp, biting Fielding roles. And quite a lot of the roles she took were parodying her own family, which, yeah, I can see why they got upset with that. And they put on the plays in which members of her family had important or notable roles. So she played Lord Foppington as her dad had played Lord Foppington, as a parody of her dad. And she also played Ancient Pistol, which was the role that her brother was famous for, who was currently making a name for himself in Drury Lane. And so the family pretty much cut her dry. But it was fine. She was pioneering this exciting theatre with Henry Fielding. Now, anyone who knows much about licensing in the 18th century knows what's going to happen next. Walpole introduced a new licensing act, which actually was enforced until the 1960s, and it shut down Fielding's theatre. It sent Fielding off. He had to go and study law. He ended up becoming a novelist, as we all know, and the founder of the Bow Street Runners. Charlotte Charke, on the other hand, not as lucky. So she became a strolling actor, and she'd started by this point wearing men's clothes most of the time. Whether this was for safety, whether it's for kicks, whether it was just because it was easier. I'm not sure. The writer's not sure, but that's what she did. And she travelled around with her young daughter, bringing up her daughter as best she could. And then her daughter became an actor as well. Shacked up with another actor. They went off to America and became some of the first travelling actors around the Americas, which is quite interesting. And so Charlotte Charke, not much money now, a bit down on her luck, but she finds possible love. She has this companion, Mrs. Brown. She calls herself Mr. Brown, and they stay together for a very long time, and they at least have a cosy domestic arrangement, if nothing else. And she starts writing her memorials. What do they call them? Her memoirs. She starts writing her memoirs, and they're highly coloured by her very... I wouldn't believe everything she says. She's an actor through and through. She sees the whole world as a theatre. Everything she sees, she compares to a play. Everything is a performance to her. And so the memoirs are a performance as well. So how much you can believe them. But they sound like a great read. If anyone's got a copy of Charlotte Charke's memoirs, I really want them. I've got Colley Cibber's memoirs, and I'll get to them one day, but Charlotte sounds so much more interesting. And so she did that, and she sold some novels, and then she died, as people do, from a flu. Good. And yeah, that's her life. And it's told in this. And it's brilliant. It's really, really good. The details are great. There's this big opening sort of scene where there's an unknown actor who's being propositioned by a woman, and she's got lots of money. She could save this actor from penury, and the actor has to say, "Oh, sorry, mate, I'm actually a girl," and that's how we get introduced to Charlotte. There's her as a 4-year-old putting on her father's wig and hat and sword and going around in a ditch trying to look like her dad. It reminds me of that little girl who interrupts the video call. She really wanted to impress her dad as a young girl. There's another one of her as a 6-year-old who gets all these other children involved and is walked around on like a stretcher dressed as a queen to people. I love it. She seems like she was enormous fun, and she seems like she kept her spirits up. She had a lot of difficulty in the end. The theatre world just didn't quite work out for her in the end, and her family didn't support her, and she had to scrabble. At one point she was selling oil. She was an oil salesman. At another point she was a sausage salesman. She tried to set up a shop, but she kept giving people free things away. She also tried to set up a restaurant. She was a waitress at one point. Like, this is someone who... She has that 18th century energy to her. Her whole life is like a big Catherine wheel. It's colourful, it's bright, it's very loud, it just fizzes. It's really, really good. And Catherine Chevalot, I find that a very hard name to say, I'm afraid. Chevalot, yeah. She's told this story brilliantly, and it's a really, really good book, and it's been sitting on my shelves for years, and why have I never got round to it? I really, really enjoyed it, and that's all I've got to say about it, really. The other thing I've been reading, as I started last month, is this. That's not our friend Corona. I've actually had a cold, of all things. this is split into 3 parts. I read the first part and a bit of the second. He's great. He is very, very funny. I very much like him. I like how he takes an idea and he runs with it, and he often runs into strange directions. I love when he's being personal. He talks about how he got knocked unconscious because of this stupid servant who ran into him on a horse, and what it was like, and how his unconsciousness has changed the way he thought about life and death. His thoughts about his dad. He obviously really, really worshipped his dad, and has a real respect for him. He's dead now before this began, and that's pretty interesting. And his best friend, that beautiful phrase, I loved him because he was he and I was I. And there's loads and loads of good things. And when I sit and write a review of this, I'm going to find so many things I loved. So many weird little stories, so many interesting takes on stories, so many strange alleyways. However, as lockdown Corona reading, it's a bit, because it's essays, it's a bit plotless, and I've been finding it hard to pick it up. Not because I haven't enjoyed it, but because not having the routine, I need a little bit more. So I've actually switched on to some Muriel Sparks, and I'm gonna read a few more novels. As last month I actually didn't read any novels. I'm also going to be part of an online Hard Times reading group. It's going to take 12 weeks because we're going to be reading it as the different issues were released. So that'll be good. Anyway, so that's what I've been up to. I hope everybody's safe and well, and I hope to see you in better times next month.
I'm so happy.